This is AI Inside, episode 56, recorded Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. Close enough for jazz and AI. This episode of AI Inside is made possible by our wonderful patrons at patreon.com/AI Inside Show. If you like what you hear, head on over and support us directly, and thank you for making independent podcasting possible. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of AI Inside, the podcast where we take a look at the AI that is layered throughout so much of the world of technology at rapid pace. I feel like every single weekend I'm looking at the development week after week of artificial intelligence and its integration into tech, integration into the discussion around technology, and it's not letting up. So that's why I'm really happy we do this show every single week. I'm Jason Howell, joined as always by my friend and co-host, Jeff Jarvis. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, boss. How are you? How's the with skiing, snowboarding? What's your risk of choice?
All of the above. I am in the mountains and snowboarding and skiing. All of the above. It just depends on who in the house is doing what. I am keeping locked into the snowboard, but yeah, we've got kind of an even mix of all things. So it's been a lot of fun. It's Winter Park, Colorado, which is apparently the coldest resort in Colorado as far as skiing and snowboarding is concerned. So, we're staying.
What's your Fahrenheit right now?
What is it outside right now? Let me check my watch. It is 19 degrees. That's not too bad. I mean, with all the snow, it kind of insulates a little bit,
As they would say in Arizona, it's a dry cold.
Yes, that's right. It is a very dry cold. You have no idea. We've got humidifiers to try and combat it, but it's kind of crazy. Thank you, everybody, for supporting us each and every week. We do have a wonderful support crew on Patreon, patreon.com/AI Inside Show. Our newest patron, Tim Epperson. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Here as of a few days ago. So we appreciate your continued support. Also, if you're watching this live, we have a lot of you watching via X, actually, as we're streaming live on Jeff's X account. You should subscribe to the show just to be sure that you don't miss it when you can't catch us live. That's aiinside.show. But why don't we jump right to it, because I don't know how long my internet is going to keep stable. So we might as well just pretend like things are going according to plan and jump right in, starting, the Humane story just gets more and more interesting. And honestly, you had to see something like this coming, right? Like it was never looking very good for Humane ever since they released their hardware last year. And HP Incorporated is going to acquire Humane's assets, $116 million for that. By the way, a year ago, Humane wanted $750 million to $1 billion for a buyout. That was last June. Oof. So not even a year ago. So they're getting a fraction of that, a tenth, if you go by the $1 billion. So, oof.
There was a great old site back in the days of the 2000 bubble called I'll clean it up, F Company, that listed all the companies that were going bad. There should be a separate subset site of all of the hubristic A, wishes for huge buyouts, and B, big buyouts they wish they should have taken.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the other side of that, yeah.
Yeah, regrets on the other side. Like, oh, man, why didn't we just do what we could then? Yeah, well, I mean, at the same time, I guess at least you got something. Could have been worse, I suppose. HP gets Humane's software platform, their IP, their patents, which around how many patents do they have? Somewhere around 300, I think. Most Humane employees will be brought into this new team at HP called HP IQ. So they were at Humane working on a cutting-edge device that is supposed to be the future of AI in hardware. Now they're going to integrate AI into connected conference rooms, also printers and HP's computers. So I don't know how that feels, but hey, at least you got a job, I suppose. So there's that.
Yeah, I saw somebody on one of the socials said, don't dance on their grave. Every company that starts, it takes a lot of courage. And fine, I agree with that. But then somebody answered back and said, well, they kind of danced on the grave of the phone.
That's true.
They said that we're going to eliminate the phone. There's going to be no need for a phone. So that level of hubris comes back around to bite you in the butt.
Well, and we've talked a lot in the past about like, or at least I believe this. I can't remember what your stance is on this in particular, but I think we both agree that there will be a time, I think, where there is a hardware device of some sort that really shows the benefit of having something that is designed around artificial intelligence. That's what I think at some point. But like I have to imagine at some point on this wide, planet Earth that someone's going to come up with an idea that actually resonates, actually works, and makes sense. It isn't completely duplicative of what we already have on our smartphones. But I could be totally wrong. Like maybe that's like not a pursuit worth exploring because it doesn't need to.
Yeah, I keep on thinking it's probably not a function of the AI. Except for like glasses, fine. We're already there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Meta's already doing that, and Google, God bless them, is going to try again. And on the old This Week in Google, we talked a long time ago about carrying around your blob. Your computing connected device that could connect with any screen and do all kinds of things.
That's right.
And I think that's kind of what your phone is now, in a sense.
Totally.
Because it connects with your car, and you're using your phone as the brains for your car to an extent, right? But I don't know if it really demands a device.
Maybe it doesn't.
I'm trying to figure out what it does. It was interesting to think about, but so far all the devices have failed, and I don't think AI is the thing. It's AI inside.
It's AI inside, right? Like it's just kind of
why
there.
it's called that. Yeah,
everywhere.
Yeah, I think so.
And so maybe, yeah, that's right. Maybe the destination isn't the AI. It's kind of like the conversation that we've been having about all these companies stumbling over themselves to make sure that that this feature is AI and that feature is the AI, and that hopefully eventually there will be a point where the AI kind of fades off into the background and it just becomes this thing does this thing, and the selling point isn't the AI, it's the function. It's the the destination is the output that you get out of it, and not just the fact that it's got AI, that buzzword integrated to it. And it's kind of the same thing here. Like maybe that doesn't matter as much as just like what it does for you. If you happen to have a Humane AI pin, that device is going to stop working like in a week.
That's the really bad part. They're going to offer some refunds. I don't know what. I wonder what's the sum.
Yeah, no, it's like if you bought within the past 90 days, you have to submit by February 27th. Meanwhile, the pin is basically worthless on February 28th. That's when the functionality goes away. So you've got, I don't know, 7 or 8 days to tell them, hey, I want a refund because I bought it within the next 90 days. I think there's another avenue. There was an issue with some of the hardware having, being potentially the potential of like lighting on fire or something like that. I can't remember exactly what that was. And if you had filed for that, then you get a portion of your money back. But nowhere in any of this, like here's what I wonder: how many of these damn things were sold? And if you're HP, does it behoove you to be like, you know what, let's just give them their damn money back because this was never worth anything to begin with. And, that buys you a little bit of positive press. I don't know, but that's not what's happening. You're kind of screwed,
Yeah. And it was a gamble.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I bought some Kickstarter things that didn't really work back there. So fine.
Yeah, it happens, I suppose. It's just this one happened very spectacularly.
Yeah, it did. It was a flame. It was a real flame out. Because it was because of their hubris, because they went overboard what they promised. And I guess you kind of have to if you're going to charge that much for something. But it was a little too much.
Yeah. Also, real quick before we move on, this is also a really good example of how hardware that's so completely reliant on like cloud compute, the way this device was, like pretty much everything that this device did relied on the cloud for the most part. And so the second they turn this off, if you have that hardware, like you can do, I think the only thing they said, and I don't even know why you even say this on a device that's completely worthless or useless, is that it'll have, be able to monitor the battery health of the device. It will be able to do that. You just won't be able to do any of the useful things with the hardware that you want to do because it was all relying on the cloud, and the cloud goes away. And so anyways, pour one out for the Humane AI pin.
Yeah.
I feel like we poured many out at this point for the Humane.
May it rest in HP.
Yes. May it rest in HP. This Monday, XAI released Grok 3 with a live stream starring the world's most powerful billionaire, unelected powerful billionaire, Elon Musk. This includes a think mode for reasoning applications, a big brain mode when you want to solve more difficult problems. It has deep search because everyone has a research tool now that uses the internet. And of course, it also taps into X as a data source. Soon, they announced that soon it'll have a voice mode, probably not very long from now, I think weeks, I think they were saying. Eventually an enterprise API. And finally, they also announced, or Musk also announced, that kind of the plan going forward is when there's a new major version of Grok, the previous version will be open sourced. And so that's the plan anyways. I don't know if they'll stick to that, but that's what's happening with Grok 2. It's open sourced. And you get a price hike. Premium Plus goes from $22 a month to $40 a month. So almost double. That's a big increase. So yeah.
So
I haven't used Grok, by the way.
I just went in for my amusement and I just went to Grok because I'm a involuntary blue check mark.
Yes.
I was given the check mark without pay. I do not pay for it. Mm-hmm. So I hid it. Mm-hmm. But thus I get access to Grok. So I have Grok 2.
Nice little perk, I suppose.
So I asked, just to be a smartass, how do we get to peace in Ukraine, considering what's being said?
Oh, my goodness.
He's hanging out. Interestingly, step one is ceasefire and de-escalation. Interesting, too, is inclusion of key players. Talks must include both Ukraine and Russia.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Disagreeing with the boss there, are we?
Yeah, they need to connect with each other and get on the same page.
I've seen some other examples where it has come out with the Musk-Trump party line out of Grok. So color me dubious about everything that he does.
Yeah,
and color Benedict Evans dubious too. Mm-hmm. So I liked his post on Grok was congratulations to Grok on spending a lot of money to be yet another company on the leaderboards for a commodity technology with no defensibility that we know of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that's true. I think that we see a whole bunch of companies, and we'll have another new one in a minute, trying to basically replicate each other's technology and then incrementally say, I'm faster, I'm better, I'm this, I'm that.
Oh, and they get that moment at the top, right? They get that moment and you had it, and then the next one comes along totally. I mean, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think Benedict is absolutely spot on with that. It really seems like that top leaderboard shifts with every single new release by every major AI company. They always come out with their new one, and hey, we're at the top. Now we're the big deal until the next one 2 weeks later.
And it does make sense for inventors to leapfrog each other and build on build on the shoulders of those who came before. I'm fine with that. But as somebody said, responding to Benedict, there is something slightly immoral about spending nearly $250 billion on this while doing layoffs every quarter, and spending. Is the return on investment really there just to leapfrog in a commodity use? I don't think it is. I think it's really so much now about ego.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of ego tied into it. And I mean, case in point, this is the quote unquote truth seeking AI. Yeah. I put that in hard quotes, by the way. Musk calls it, quote, maximally truth-seeking AI, even if that truth is sometimes at odds with what is politically correct. This was interesting because I saw a post by Gary.
This is where I thought Marcus. I saw something. I realized it's what you put in the rundown that I saw. Yes.
Yeah. Gary Marcus. And in there, there is a little snapshot, and someone asks XAI for its opinion on The Information, the news publication online called The Information. And the result, the output, goes on a tirade, saying, quote, legacy media is garbage. And it goes on to say X, quote, X, on the other hand, is where you find raw, unfiltered news. X is the only place for real, trustworthy news. And Gary Marcus, I'm happy you wrote this because it was an interesting look. He says everyone, and not just the information, should be genuinely terrified that the richest man in the world has built a large language model that spouts propaganda in his image. And whether you believe that statement or not, I think what Gary says there is important to consider, which is that the more and more people are using these AI systems kind of as a way to understand the world, in their minds better, I suppose. And how do we know how these systems have been created to venture in one direction or the other? And I don't know, that's something to consider with all of these systems, not just XAI.
This is why I love doing the show, because it inspires so much further thought. Because I hadn't thought of this before this moment, in what both you and Gary bring up. Our view of messaging at scale, right, was media. Right. I own a newspaper, you don't. Yeah. I got to decide what's printed, right? Then we get to the internet and social media, where I can say one thing and it hits scale when it hits virality, when enough people choose to spread it on, right? And Musk buys Twitter, so he spreads his own stuff whether or not anyone chooses to see it, right? And that's the next version of scale. What I hadn't thought of here is I have my own LLM, and I'm going to tell it what to say in every possible way, even in topics that I haven't necessarily said anything about. It's going to repeat my propaganda, my worldview, my message on every possible interaction. And then it's going to fill the socials and fill the internet with that. That's a whole nother level of scale. Now, when people worry about AI and disinformation, it can make disinformation. It's easy to lie now. And we've been able to lie since we were able to talk. So I'm not really concerned about that notion. But it is interesting that you can create your own lie machine here. The key will be, don't believe it. It's Grok. And by doing this, he's cutting out any possible credibility that his system could have. That's his choice.
Well, and do the people that are using it care?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
You know what I mean? Like, because it is also, a lot of this is kind of choosing sides to a certain degree, and there are a huge amount of people that are going to use Grok specifically for the reason that Musk is putting it out there, that it's a truth seeking, and whether it's actually speaking truth. I mean, this actually kind of ties into a discussion that we're going to have a little bit later around kind of how these systems are now versus where they're going. And yeah, it's just a real interesting time for how they're all developing. And kind of this moment of truth versus truth matters a whole lot less than it used to, even though it matters a lot.
It's my truth.
Yeah.
But the other thing too that Gary does that's really good is he keeps testing these things. And Gary has a real attitude, and I like that.
For sure.
So he makes fun of it, and he asks Grok 2 to draw a picture of 5 different basic geometric shapes and label each one. So it labels the triangle a tickle, a circle is an isqueer, the square is a rectangle, a circle is a rectangle, and a a hexagon is a pentacle. It screws up in every possible way, totally. and makes up entire new words. Has no sense. Then he tries to have it draw a picture of an electric guitar and label the parts. It screws that up. Finally, he has it draw a calendar. Just make a picture of a calendar. It does very nice pictures of calendars. And he tells it to circle today's date, February 16th. It fails miserably at that.
That's so weird. That's so interesting.
It's like what do they call it when you were a kid and you try to pin the tail of the donkey with you're blindfolded. It didn't get anywhere near the donkey.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, Gary's just ridiculing Grok because it's not, AGI's around the corner. Yeah. But on the other hand, I think there is something that is insidious here in the wrong hands and to the wrong viewers.
For sure.
So he's right.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, we are going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about a new entrant into the world of AI. A new company has been formed, and we don't know a whole lot about it, but we do know a little. We'll talk about that here in a second. All right, Mira Murati, who resigned as OpenAI's CTO 6 months ago, not that long ago, has a new startup called Thinking Machines Lab. First thing I thought, Jeff, is I wonder if they considered intelligent machines.
I wondered too.
Possibly on the list somewhere.
Yeah.
Focused on interactions between humans and machines. Quote, we are excited to build multimodal systems that work with people collaboratively. I mean, I feel like we've kind of heard that a million times, but around 30 employees so far, 2/3 of which are former OpenAI colleagues, but also some people from Meta, some from Mistral. And Murata is really focusing on AI alignment, which is essentially human values for safer, more reliable systems, that sort of stuff. And what do you think? I mean, we really don't know much about this other than that, but what do you think?
Right. And you've got others out there. At the same time, by the way, Ilya Sutskever's safe superintelligence is similarly trying to say we're the safe ones. He's raising $1 billion on, I think, $70 billion valuation. It's just wonderfully absurd. We don't know much, and we'll see what this turns into. She's obviously very smart. She was embroiled in the Peyton Place soap opera that was OpenAI. And it occurs to me, Jason, when I saw this story, I thought a few years from now, I think we're going to talk about the OpenAI mafia the way we talk about the PayPal mafia. That people came through the company on their way to something else, and some of whom I don't think are very likable. Some of whom are likable, are okay. I like Reid Hoffman, but I don't like some of the other people who came through Musk. And I think the same thing is going to happen here, where people like she are going out. They built a reputation, they gathered a team, and they took it out and went out on their own. And I think that's not a bad thing in Silicon Valley. We'll see if the gene pool here is good.
Yeah, is it for good or is it for evil? We will certainly find out at some point. Here, at least around this company, she has plans to share the code, share the data sets, the model specs, all in an effort to broaden research into AI alignment. So it sounds like contributing a lot of the work that they're doing into the field of research, I suppose. So that's positive sounding. Big move towards an open-ish source idea, which isn't not a bad thing, I don't think. I mean, we've been pretty positive on the open approach for AI so far. So it'll be interesting to see what she comes up with. She and her team. Yep. New York Times.
We will keep you informed.
Yes, indeed. New York Times transitioning towards an AI, bringing more AI tools into the newsroom and integrating that into the news work. Tasks like SEO headlines, editing, summarization, product development. They are prohibiting certain things, though, like drafting articles, generating images, other kind of editorial-focused tasks. Don't bring the AI into that, but things that maybe people don't want to do, like the SEO crafting and stuff like that. I guess it gets a thumb up. What do you think about this?
A friend of mine, Zach Seward, who's a brilliant journalist. He was the co-founder. Well, he was the owner of Quartz before it was sold to Geo Media. Before that, he was a Wall Street Journal journalist, really smart, responsible, good journalist. And so he's in charge of AI development in the newsroom at the Times. So I have faith that they're going to use it well. I think they'll use it smartly. And I think that to use it is, all the time in the show, I quote admiringly what Schibsted is doing in the Nordics. And they're using it similarly there as an aid to the journalist.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought of immediately when I read this. I was like, okay, so we're seeing more of a kind of a merging into that mentality, at least a little bit closer.
And I think there was a story today that I put in really late that we don't need to talk about, but Google has built an AI co-scientist to speed up research. And what it made me think of is the way that that's going to work is I have this data, I have these thoughts. Can it suggest any other angles for investigation? And I think that's a decent way to think about how a journalist could use AI is here's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm still responsible for reporting it. I'm responsible for what I say in the end. But maybe there's something I missed. Maybe there's a correlation. Maybe there's an angle. As long as it's not misused, I think that's fine. Totally. I'm a little surprised they're not using it for illustration. I'm going to guess that's more a union issue than anything else.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Because I think illustration is one of the best uses of it. Now that online, and we've talked about this in the show in the past, I think. In the old days, a fraction of newspaper stories were illustrated, unlike magazines. Mm-hmm. And now everything has to be illustrated online, and it's a cost. And I know that illustrators don't like the idea of being replaced, but in a sense, they're not being replaced. There's an extra resource needed now to make illustrations. So I'm kind of surprised they don't use it to make illustrations and label it properly as such. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just it's no different from somebody making up a picture of a geek on skis in Colorado than a machine making up that picture. Right. And but they're choosing not to. And I think that's probably the reason why.
Choosing not to for now. I mean, if we'd gone back a year ago and said, hey, New York Times, kind of opening up the newsroom to all the AI kind of tools and everything, it would have seemed like, oh, well, hell no, like that's not happening. The more rapidly places like New York Times are, I guess, getting more of a maybe friendly is the wrong word, but finding a way with the technology as opposed to being immediately apprehensive.
Right.
And so maybe a year from now they do open it up further because mentality and temperament and all that around it lessens and becomes a little bit more amenable to that.
So I'm writing a book right now about the history of the linotype. Which was the machine that replaced setting type one letter at a time. And somewhere here I have a letter to show you. Let's see here. So those of you on video, this is a piece of type. Just one little letter. For 500 years, every word was set piece of type. So then it came out, my goodness. And instead it was set a line at a time. This is a line of type. All right, anyway. The International Typographical Union was responsible for setting type a line at a time for 500 years, and in the U.S. for a few hundred years in the end. But they said that you could have thought that they would have acted like the Luddites or like Captain Swing and said, burn it down, no, kill the machine, we don't want any machines. Instead, they quite wisely said, it's inevitable, we got to be in charge of it. Mm-hmm. We are the ones who are going to run these machines. We are the ones who know it. And there's I think a great lesson for the adaptation to technology here. They lost staff. They lost by one account, 36,000 typesetters. Mm-hmm. But within 5 years, they had all that back and more because the industry grew tremendously because of this efficiency and because of this automation. And then the end of the story is that they didn't remember their own lesson. And in the 1960s, they opposed the technology, killed 5 of 8 newspapers in New York, and eventually killed the union. So when it comes to things like AI and writers and others, I think that the best path is not to resist it, but to insist to be in charge of it, to be the agent of it. And so I think in a way, that's what the Times is doing here, and what Shipstead has been doing. And it's saying to the newsroom, this is yours. It's your tool. You use it. You figure it out. You find the good benefit of it, and you're the ones who know best. And as long as that's the attitude, I don't think there's not much to fear. There's always things to fear, but I don't think there's much. So we'll see how the Times comes up. But I guarantee you, something stupid will come out, and it will get blamed on the machine
for sure, guaranteed, going to happen.
Yeah, I also am writing about. Sorry, I'm going off on my Jeff tangent, but I was also writing about. At the end of this period in the 60s and 70s and 80s, when Murdoch had what was called the whopping episode where he replaced everybody in production overnight. And I saw a column from a London newspaper that said, who are the journalists going to blame now? Whenever there was a typo or something wrong in their stories in print, they could, well, it's the typesetters. That was the typesetters. Yeah, not me. You can always find somebody else to blame. And then when they started typing their own stories in and it went straight through to the press, the columnist said, who do you blame now? So it'll be interesting, too, to see whether anybody tries to blame AI for something stupid the Times does.
Yeah. That is interesting. New York Times is not alone on this either in the U.S. Financial Times, Fox Media, Axel Springer, of course, we've talked about.
Yep.
Associated Press, all doing similar things. So you said it, the inevitability. That was something that really came to mind as I was reading through this too. It's kind of like it's inevitable. So, okay, at what point do you just kind of open up and say, how do we work with it instead of working against it?
Right.
Yeah. With the flow. Jeff, you included an article that looks at the Google mothership and its internal challenges regarding AI development. And I felt like as I was reading through it, I was like, time and time again, this just sounds so familiar. You and I have been following Google long enough to know that I think that this seems to be part of the company's DNA. Tell me a little bit about this.
So what happened here is that I think everyone is very impressed with Notebook LM. It's the one application I hear constantly people say that they like it, they're impressed with it, they use it, but it almost didn't happen because of internal politics at Google. And that's what happens at big companies. Mm-hmm. So the people at Workspace wanted to say, no, we're going to do that. No, we were working on that. No, we got that coming. No, you can't do that. And it went around and around and around and almost didn't happen. But thank goodness, finally did. In the end, leaders of both teams stuck with Notebook LM, and it launched as a standalone website, and has since been added as a service in Workspace. Mm-hmm. Now, by the way, since its release, we've talked about this in the show before, 3 key members of the team have left to build a competitor. And somebody else recently left to build something related as well, I think in the audio world. So it's spawning all kinds of action. And it would have been a real shame if this thing got screwed up and people would have said, well, no, it has to work within Workspace, so it can't do this and it can't do that, and we don't do this, and we don't do that. That's the way technologies work in companies. Mm-hmm. You know, when I'm going memory lane today, sorry.
No, do it.
Back in the day, when I was helping to install the first computers in newsrooms, I always got amazed that people had huge territorial turf fights over boring computers. And why do people care so much? But there's something about it. People just want to be in charge of it, see prior discussion, and they don't want to think that it's not their choice, and they screw it up along the way. And big companies are like that. And I remember years ago hearing Eric Schmidt in person say that the biggest problem for Google would be Google's own success and size. And I think that's what happens. It gets so big, it gets so hidebound. Totally. But in this case, at least, it worked. The good product came out. They benefited. We benefited. But it's nice to report on these kinds of near misses because I hope it's an object lesson to other companies and to Google itself not to screw up.
Yeah. It's really hard when a company gets that big. You know, no matter how good the company was at one time, at a certain point, it's just that massive scale and all of these teams. I mean, I feel like this is just a story that I've been hearing and talking about on the Android show for so many years, just related to that one specific facet of Google. And then you take all of their efforts and so many conflicting approaches, so many situations where this team is working on something, this team over here is working on something, and to the outside looking in, you're like, oh, well, that's basically the same thing. Like, why don't they just pool their efforts and work together? But internally, it's almost like they're working against each other to prove that theirs is the right approach. And then it doesn't get integrated. And it's just messy. This is Google.
It's classic innovator's dilemma.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember one time. God, I'm sorry. More memory lane with Uncle Jeff. I remember a newspaper I worked with in Syracuse. The publisher regretted that somebody had started a new publication in Syracuse that was nothing about health in Syracuse. Ergo, they got all the classified ads for nursing and doctors' jobs because they were cheaper and more focused than the big newspaper. And the publisher said, I'm not going to let that happen again. Better we compete with ourselves than somebody else competes with us. And that's the enlightened view, I think, for a company. But it's really hard because somebody has their turf.
Yeah.
This is mine, and if you come in, you're going to cannibalize me, the other big corporate word. You're going to take away something from me, or you're going to beat me to it, or in politics I lose, and they lose sight of the bigger picture. So in this case it worked, but oftentimes God knows what we haven't seen.
Yeah.
Because things have been stopped.
Totally.
Yeah. But this is a good article in the information.
Indeed. Don't listen to what XAI tells you about the information. It's a good place to get.
Exactly. Let's give Aaron Wu is the byline on the article. Give credit where it's due.
There we go. Perplexity rolled out its own research project. We were talking a little bit earlier about research in AI and like, the actual project or product of, use this tool. And it's really kind of tuned into and zeroed into being good at reaching out to, a number of different places and asking questions and being critical and then presenting a white paper or a printout of some sort that you can, kind of have a large, expansive understanding of that topic or that question. And Perplexity has their own called Deep Research. I think it's almost like they're all named Deep Research.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they are. Yeah.
Google has a Deep Research project or product. OpenAI has one titled the same. So anyways.
Right.
They've all got their own. This one's free to use, though. So that is a little bit of a differentiator. If you get up to 5 queries per day, you do have to be logged into your Perplexity account, but you don't have to be a paid user to use it. So that's nice.
So before the show, I put something in here. I did 2 things. One, at the very end of the show, we're going to talk about a really interesting piece somebody wrote. And at the end of that article, somebody shared their Notebook LM query that helped them do it. So I tried to put that into this, but it was too much. So I put in a different one of what we talked about a little while ago. And I asked, how did Leibniz's invention of binary math alongside the Morse code and the Baudot code lead to our digital computer revolution, the internet, and AI?
Woo! Wow!
Right?
Did you just was this a burning question you just happened to have?
Actually, yes.
Around?
I was just writing that paragraph. I won't do it again. I won't go down memory lane. But it has a relation to the typesetter and telegraphy. Mm-hmm. But I discovered I just by accidentally came recently that it was Leibniz in 1685, I think, who invented the binary math, the digital 0-1, that is the basis of everything digital today, right? And that's mind-blowing, right? Yeah. And but I think that Morse code added to that because by encoding letters into dots, dashes, and pauses, that was kind of a next step that enabled what would become ASCII, would enable the encoding of language into a digital world. So anyway, I asked Deep Research, and I haven't had time to read this. I did it right before the show, but it has some good explanations here with links, understanding binary as a universal language, from mechanical calculators to symbolic machines, Morse code democratizing digital communication, Baudot code, which had 5 bits per character per letter, the first binary character encoding, convergence paving the way for networks and AI, and then finally, a conclusion, a legacy of symbolic abstraction. Oh, I'm going to steal that. That's nice. The digital revolution emerged from a cascade of abstractions. Leibniz's reduction of logic to 0-1, Morris's compression of language to dots, dashes, Baudot's mapping of the characters to binary sequences. Together, they transformed information into a manipulable resource, decoupled from physical media. Woo! As AI and quantum computing advance, this legacy persists, proving that the most transformative technologies often begin as simple symbols on a page. Whoa, well done. I'll give you an A for that, Perplexity.
Goodness.
Yeah. So we were asked by one of our kind readers before the show, what do you think of Deep Research?
That's right.
And so we promised we would talk about it, and here it is. Now, it still did that kind of BS phase at the beginning where I'm thinking this, I'm wondering that. And I still don't think that's a reflection of its reasoning. I think that's BS. Some argue with me that no, it's actually seeing what we're seeing there. I think it's a performative presentation of it, but I don't care.
I feel like there's some truth to that. I feel because and hear me out, and maybe someone's already shared this with you, and you're still unconvinced by it. But when I see that, I don't see it as like it's telling me this to make me feel better. I see it as, okay, let me put it this way. I've used a certain image generation and music generation systems to where you can put in your prompt and you put in a short prompt, and then you can have it do like a magic prompt response, which is essentially it takes your prompt and it adds to it. It's almost like it recreates your prompt based on what it knows, and then that informs the system to do something different or better or nicer or whatever. And so when I see what deep research is doing, that's kind of the lens that I see it through. It's like, this is what I want to know. And it goes, okay, well, then we put that in here and we see this. Okay, now we can take what we see and kind of reshape what you were asking based on the new information we have. And maybe I'm wrong, but when I see that whole process, it's kind of like I'm looking at it through the lens of like, how can I make my prompts do that so that I can cut out the middleman?
Right.
You know what I mean? I could be wrong, but for whatever reason, it's been kind of assuring to me to see that.
So, okay, I think that works in images because you don't get the BS of the machine saying, let me see.
Right. Well, there is that. No, you're absolutely right.
Right.
There is that too.
And I think that maybe the hums are just added. Maybe that's all that's performative. But I think it ruins the credibility of believing that it is a sequence. But you're absolutely right, Jason, that the way this supposedly works now, what researchers have found again and again and again is that slicing a task into steps is how you improve the results. Whether you do that manually by doing question upon question upon question, or whether the machine does it itself by cutting it up into multiple questions, the results are better. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what the machine is, in fact, in some way doing. I would just rather see a more literal expression of that than adding the, let me see, okay, that's interesting. BS.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it goes a little bit down the cheesy valley territory with some of that stuff, because it's like, yeah, okay, thank you for trying to speak to me like you're a human. We know you are not.
We know you're not.
That's so unnecessary. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's interesting though, and it does take a while. Although it doesn't, I haven't used ChatGPT's deep research version because I don't pay $200 a month for ChatGPT, and I won't. But but apparently that one can take a very long time. Like you can put in a query,
really,
and, you could be waiting 20, 25 minutes for the final result. Whereas this, I don't know, it seems to be like 3, 4, 5 minutes, somewhere around there. So it's a little bit faster.
This was quick, and it also gave me footnotes.
A couple of minutes. Yeah.
It was good. I just printed it out, in fact. So I'm going to use that line. Now, my next question is that everyone's seen this. So if you see me use this line in my book, you can come back and say, oh, Jarvis, I know where that came from. Okay. So I think I have to footnote that.
I was just going to say, how do you cite that as an author?
I don't know. Because what it is I gave it the idea about this. My question presumed this sequence. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's mine. Not that it's all fresh. I mean, others have had the same thing. But but that legacy of symbolic abstraction, that phrasing, is its. So, what's the footnote? Do I footnote that and say, well, I got inspired by Perplexity on that, or do I just say that's my machine? I use this. I don't know.
Oh, that's going to be an interesting thing to see play out. And you're kind of at the, you're working with it along with whoever else is kind of in a similar situation. And in the next couple of years, we're going to see where the dust settles as far as like what the standards are around that.
And what are my students? I think I'm going to email my friend Matthew Kirschenbaum, who I've quoted often, who wrote the Atlantic article on the textpocalypse. He was part of the MLA, Modern Language Association task force on the use of AI in the classroom, in English class, basically. So I'm curious what the standard should be for acknowledging collaboration.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Super interesting.
Fun.
When you figure that out, definitely let's retouch on that on the show, because I'm super curious to hear.
One more quick thing here. I think that you raised it to me first because you started using it first, but I think Perplexity is a bit of a dark horse here. They're, as we're talking about the commodities of Grok and whatever else is around, there are all those others. They're quietly, not so quietly, because they're doing, stunts like trying to buy TikTok.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
But they're somewhat subtly implementing the AI for users in better ways, right? So their Discover platform with news was really good. This, I think, is the best substantiation of this. It's less geeky. It's prettier. It's cleaner.
So more accessible.
They're just doing a good job.
I totally.
I don't really know who's behind Perplexity. I'd love to know more. Maybe get them on the show because I think this is impressive. They quietly have once again and again. I say, "Oh, Perplexity did that well." So I just want to give them credit.
Indeed, happy to give them credit. It would be really hard for me to do what I'm doing right now if I didn't have Perplexity to kind of lean into for some of the functions of my independent career. So yeah, I'm really happy.
So Perplexity, we're gonna send you a video of this and then ask for one of the founders to come on.
Is that how it works?
We're not doing it for that reason. This is earnest, but in
Jeff,
the fact,
is that how it works? I should ask Perplexity and see.
Oh yes,
that's how. Yes, my prompt should be how can we get Perplexity to sponsor us on this podcast? Perplexity. All right. Speaking of, let's take a quick break and have a few words for you to listen to before we are back and we take a look at a few more stories, including what I feel is a pretty fascinating look at the evolution of computing that you put in the rundown. That's coming up here in a second. All right, Jeff, this first of two, and this one really talks. This one is really cool because it really breaks down the different stages of computing, and they approach it in 4 different stages, essentially. And I'll just try and summarize them real quick, and then we can talk about it. The early era, which is fully deterministic, and essentially what does that mean? Input, algorithm, output, all done with fixed, predictable data. So, in the days of old of computing, we would put in information. It was a fixed piece of information. It would be processed a certain way, and we would get the same answer out on the other end. It was fully deterministic.
So the example would be a spreadsheet.
Right. Yes, exactly.
You can ask a question. You can ask a what if. What if I change this? But you know what you're changing. It's got data. You know what it's doing. And it's giving you a specific, predictable answer.
Then we've got big data, machine language era, which is deterministic input, very fixed. Probabilistic algorithm, so a little mushy is the word that I keep coming up with there, and then deterministic output. So the input and the output fixed, that processing in between aided by less specificity and more, like I said, kind of mushy processing, like recommendation engines, for example.
Right. So it's not necessarily a right answer that can be determined, but it has an answer. So it says, this is the ad I'm going to show you, or this is the movie I'm going to recommend.
And it might have a different recommendation for other people depending on the inputs that they're giving to the system and stuff like that. The current era, according to this article or writing, is fully probabilistic. And this, the big example here, of course, is generative AI. All stages kind of mushy, right? There's no fixed information. It's more creative. It's more pliable, I guess. And there is no real certainty about what you're putting in, about how it's working with that data, and what you're getting out of it. You can ask it a question 10 times and get 10 different answers. So yeah, plausible yet incorrect information is one of the downsides.
Right. And then
we have the future, which is probabilistic leading into deterministic output. So accepting that kind of like mushy, creative kind of input, accepting the fact that the processing that's happening behind the scenes with the algorithm can go any number of ways, but that in the end, there's some sort of gut check, some sort of comparison between the output of the system and truth or fact or whatever that is, to kind of steer it onto the tracks again. And yeah.
So we both found this really interesting. And credit where it's due. I found this thanks to Benedict Evans, who I quote often. His newsletter just always has great stuff. And I recommend it highly. And I had to do some searching here. This is by
who's the author of this? This is
Naren Joshinmal.
okay.
First name Narain, so I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Joshinmal. And he's a product leader. He or she is a product leader, mentor, advisor. Over a decade across 2 stints at Meta, drove growth for ads and so on. So really smart. And I think it abstracts. That's the word of the day, is abstraction. It abstracts us to say, this is the academic skill. My kind of academic mentor named Jay Rosen at New York University, I'd watch him work and he would stop and he'd say, what's happening here? Let's examine this. And I think that's what this piece does so well, is it makes us see at a very high level, if we're now at the stage of probabilistic to probabilistic to probabilistic, vague answer, vague process, vague question, vague answer, vague process. What's also true is that we're at the age of approximation. Right? With the beauty of computers, I always thought when I was younger at this, I was never young with computers because I'm too old. But the beauty of computers is there was always a right answer. There was always a solution. There was always, and that's just not the case anymore.
No.
Now it's close enough for jazz or AI. It gives you a different answer every time. It's approximate. It's going to be wrong a lot of the time. It's going to be whatever. And we're kind of learning how to adapt to that because the possibilities are great. And that sounds wrong and scary, like there should be an answer, there should be truth, there should be a fact, but life is like this.
Yeah.
Right?
So in essence, is technology becoming more of a reflection of that, of the not always one answer, kind of nature of life. And, AI has been largely trained on human interaction,
right?
Which is a reflection of that imperfection. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also the risk here, I think, and this is the problem of AGI and such, is that if we think the goal is to replicate life and then one-up it, I think that's where we get in trouble with TESCREAL and AGI and all the BS. It's a machine. It can do things that we can't do and do them really well, and it can't do some things we can do, which will get us into our final piece of the day. But it still is inevitably going to reflect somehow the way we think. And I think that's what's occurring here. And it does get closer, yes.
Yeah. One thing that came to mind to me, and maybe I've raised this question on the show before, but in a time where the importance of fact or the importance of having a specific answer versus the potential for a lot of different types of answers, that fact layer is becoming deprioritized to a certain degree with technology like this and everything. And I wonder if the probabilistic nature of AI is a symptom or a cause or completely coincidental.
Yeah, it's a great question.
It's a very now technology. When you really think about where we are, like globally on like a political, from a political perspective, from so many different aspects, the idea of fact and truth has really kind of become murky, and to a certain degree, like we were saying earlier, there's a lot of people that just kind of don't care about that. Like that's not as important as it used to be. And then we've got this technology that kind of revels in that. Like it's like, no, this is a feature, not a, this is a feature of the technology. So
right. And when you get to quantum computing, as little as I understand it, it's even more the case that we live in an approximate world, and we fooled ourselves all these years, perhaps since Leibniz, about the deterministic set nature of the world. Maybe that's just not the case. By the way, Naren, at the bottom of the post says this was created using ChatGPT deep research with the following prompt and Notebook LM for the podcast, which is also here. So we put it in a podcast, he or she put it in a podcast, and you can click and see the prompt that was given. Following a really great conversation with an old friend I reconnected with, during which we talked about the past, present, and future state of tech AI, the following simple high-level framework, which I sketched out during the meeting, has been on my mind. And that's the framework that Jason just talked you through.
Right.
So this is, and by the way,
so interesting. I missed that little footnote.
Yeah.
But yet, while I was reading through the article, some of the framings around kind of some of the ordering, the kind of the order that it was following had me wondering. I was like, God, they must have used, to some degree, they must have used AI. So that's so fascinating. And so then I have to say, like, I read this top to bottom, and I have often felt like my AI DAR is so strong that when I start to like think that I'm reading AI output, I lose interest to a certain degree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If someone shares something with me and it's so obviously completely AI generated, I'm less likely to really kind of dive in and give it 20 minutes of my time. But I did with this, and it was really well written, and I was captivated by it. And then to find out at the end, it was organized and everything through NotebookLM.
Well,
that's fascinating.
Again, it helped.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can you do audio from the page or not, given your circumstances?
I can. Is there?
There's a podcast at the top of it. I'm just wondering what the first minute or so sounds like.
Oh, I see the podcast. Let me see here. I can certainly try and see if Sorry, I'm tap dancing while I'm navigating different.
That was my fault. I shouldn't have done that to Jason.
Okay. Am I showing it? Let's see here. Oh, okay. All right. So I've added the page. Now let's see if I click on podcast and play.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. You know how much we love exploring AI's potential, right?
Let's jump ahead a little bit.
It's the same jerks all the time, haven't they?
About this. The framework argues that we're actually on the cusp of a whole new era of AI, one where it can be both creative, like our minds, but also totally reliable.
Whoa, hold on.
Whoa.
AI that's as flexible as us, but way more dependable.
I'm so surprised.
That's blowing my neural network, man.
Right.
I like AI DAR, Jason. I'm stealing that. That's great. Yeah.
Fascinating. Happy you put that in there, and my mind is a little blown.
One more thing to mention on that is that coincidentally, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal about the company being started by Brett Taylor, co-founder and CEO of Sierra. He's also, I think, now the chairman of what is he? Chairman of XAI, and he was a co-chair at Salesforce. Brett's a good guy, and he's been around. So he was talking about agents, and what he was trying to say in this article was, to this point of approximation, accept that it's imperfect. Like, get over it. You can't wait for them to be perfect to start using them. Go ahead and start using them. Of course, I hope you don't use them for nuclear war. But rather than say, will AI do something wrong, say, when it does something wrong, what are the operational mitigations that we put in place to deal with it? So you've got to deal with the imperfections of the machine. That's an entirely new way to think about how we thought of these machines. They were definitive answer machines. And this is right there an example of what that post was talking about.
Well, yes, and it's like, do you throw the baby out with the bathwater? Like, there's a lot of benefit to get from these things, and if we decided no, because sometimes it gets things wrong, we will not use these things. Like, that's getting rid of something that could potentially be a solution for some very major things down the line, and we would say no because it doesn't get everything right. And is that the right approach? Yeah, interesting. Let's end with a patented Jeff Jarvis rant.
So I feel a little bad because I'll give credit where it's due and tell you who wrote this, a professor of English named Hollis Robbins. And she had been a dean, is no longer. And for the reason you become clear, I'm glad she's not, because she wrote a newsletter post about AI in education that just scared me to death. And I saw it quoted around the socials a bit. And so a few paragraphs into it, the subhead is immediate faculty and dean action required. That gives me a cold sweat. Like, oh my God, what are they going to make us do now? Right. So this is her prescription. And I'm going to quote, every faculty member should begin to write a detailed memo specifying the following. What specific knowledge do I possess that AGI does not? What unique insights or capabilities can I offer that exceed AGI systems? Which students and in which topics would benefit enough to pay to learn from me and why? Faculty who cannot produce this memo with concrete, defensible answers have no place in the institution. There is no middle ground. OMG, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read about AI. It's just ridiculous. And what scares me is that I'm afraid that Elon Musk is going to see this and argue that, you should fire every professor who can't do this. And this is absurd. This is ridiculous. This is wrong. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when you believe the BS of AGI. When you start to believe that there is a mythical machine out there that's going to do everything better than anybody, then you're going to constantly try to replace the people you don't like, which I'm guessing this person is no fun in a faculty meeting. And she's going to try to get rid of all her colleagues, and I would guess herself, unless she believes she has something that's defensible, and that her courses are defensible. But this is ridiculous, and it's the fruit of the hubris of the AI boys. That when they argue this machine is going to be able to do all this stuff, people are going to extrapolate to these ridiculous ends. So I'm sure that Professor Robbins is a very nice, well-educated person and good teacher, but oh my God, do not let this get around.
This takes it to an extreme level. Quote, in the AGI era, the only defensible reason for universities to remain in operation, to even exist, is to offer students an opportunity to learn from faculty whose expertise surpasses current AI. Nothing else makes sense.
So I didn't want to make it into a loud, crazy Jeff rant because there's a human being involved here, Professor Robbins. But oh Lord, no.
Yeah, interesting. This and every other story that we have talked about on this show, and I realize I don't really say this in the podcast. Maybe I need to let you know that we have show notes, elaborate show notes that have links to every story that we talk about. Each and every week. If you go to aiinside.show, or if you subscribe to the podcast, you'll get it in your show, attached to the podcast in the notes section. You'll get all the links to the stories. So if any of these stories sound interesting, especially this week, I wasn't showing very much because I'm on location and it's harder to do on a smaller laptop and everything. So if you want to read these stories, and I highly recommend you do that, aiinside.show for the show notes. Yeah.
And to those who've watched us live, I don't know if you knew this, Jason, but you've been pretty pixelated the whole time. Yeah. But this software, StreamYard, records locally. So if you find this irritating, I presume that the finished version put up on YouTube will be clean. And if you want to recommend this fascinating discussion to your friends, maybe you don't want to recommend the live feed on LinkedIn or on Twitter, but the version will be up on YouTube. And where will that be?
Yeah, youtube.com/@AIInsideShow. Just go to YouTube and search for AI Inside or AI Inside Show. You'll link directly to it. And yes, I do take the recordings and then do a final edit and then up. That's what you actually get on YouTube. And then, of course, the audio podcast is always a pretty curated, produced version. So everything will sound really good. So, yes, don't trust.
But I'm glad we got to do the show this week, even though you took some time off the slopes.
That's right.
Saved you from any broken legs. And I hope you have a great, great time on the rest of your break. You deserve it.
Thank you. Will do, Jeff. And thank you we moved this recording time an hour early. You're always super flexible. I appreciate it. JeffJarvis.com is the site to go to find all of Jeff's work. So many books that you need to catch up with, including The Web We Weave. Where are they? Oh, hold on. I can't see it in the two-shot.
I see. Okay.
There we are.
The Gutenberg parenthesis now in paperback, magazine, and The Web We Weave. Gutenberg parenthesis is also out in Spanish and will be soon in German.
Right on. Love it. And then new books coming somewhere down the line.
I'm working on it right now.
As I said, everything that you need to know about the show can be found at aiinside.show, including the show notes, of course, all of our live, are the video version, the audio version, links to the YouTube channel. It's all there. So if you need to remember one place, just go to aiinside.show. If you love this show, please leave a review. We really, that is one really great way for new people to discover what we're doing with AI Inside. And so, go on to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. If they allow you to rate or review, Pocket Cast allows you to rate. Please do that so we can kind of raise visibility on everything that we're doing. And then if you really, really, really love the show, you can support us directly on Patreon. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show. You get a Discord community, ad-free versions of the show. Often those ad-free versions go up before any of the other versions. Once I'm done editing and everything, you get it first. Some hangouts. We got an executive producer level, which you get a t-shirt, an AI Inside t-shirt when you do that. And I'm happy to say we have another new executive producer. This is the most we've ever had. At one point, we've got Dr. Do, Jeffrey Maricini, WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina, Dante St. James, Bono Day Rick, and our newest executive producer, Jason Nefer. Is it Nefer? Regardless, I'm sorry if I got your name wrong, but thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. Thank you all.
It means so much to us and to the health of this show. So we appreciate you. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show. I promise my video will be better next week. I will be back home. But thank you, everybody, for watching and for listening, for being here. Thank you again, Jeff. And we'll see you next time on another episode of AI Inside. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.